Hello everybody, welcome back. It's Business. I'm going to be covering over the next few videos all of the British battleships that were released in patch 6.10. There are some various changes as well, which I'll get to right after we showcase some of the glamour shots here of the first set of battleships that I'll be covering today. So at tier 3 there's the Bellerophon, at tier 4 the Orion, tier 5 has the Iron Duke, and tier 6 is the Queen Elizabeth. I will basically segment this where, I'll go 3, 4, 5, 6 and have some of the gameplay, and I'll discuss specifics about that ship during those sequences, and some of the balance changes that I think are going to be necessary amongst these ships specifically. And in the later videos I'll be talking about the line as a whole. So just so you know what you're getting into here, and hopefully I can keep myself on track with that. But I do want to just point out that I think these are fantastic models. They really did a great job with modeling these Royal Navy battleships into the game, and they look spectacular. I do run tans of skins on as many of them as I can. They're mostly just the high tier stuff, and I'm not really going to showcase those here, and we'll get to that at a later point when we do the reviews. One of the other things that they went ahead and did with this patch was jack up the intensity of all these effects. Now I love the lighting part, the area lighting from the fires, and when there's a flash of the shells being fired up like from a ship or upon it, like when it hits, is pretty damn impressive. I really like that a lot. The problem is that it's overdone, and not only that, but that sound, you can't turn that down specifically. It's not attached to, either you have to lower the game volume down immensely and not be able to hear a damn thing, or that sound just overrides everything. It's really ridiculous. But I do like the larger water splashes. I really dislike the size and the thickness of the smoke. When there's even just one fire, you can barely see your ship. And the other thing is, when you're in close quarters combat with somebody, either you're not going to be able to see their ship because you're on fire, because the smoke is obscuring them, or when you go into your artillery zoom and you're firing at them, your own muzzle flash will actually hide the enemy ship. It's crazy. So I think I like where their head's at. sorry, but I like where their head's at with this, but they need to tone it down by about 25% is my suggestion. But I will say, from a distance too, it looks fantastic. Like if you're spectating a match, it looks really cool when you watch ships engage from their max distance and stuff. But anyways, I need to discuss some game mechanics stuff that you may or may not be aware of. So a lot of this stuff can be pretty damn in-depth and all that. For instance, AP mechanics, which I do have to discuss with the British because they are different from the other nations when it comes to battleships especially, is that AP has a particular way of calculating shell pen via range. That's a huge part of the AP penetration values. It also has to do with muzzle velocity and gun caliber, such and such. All of that matters a great deal with AP. But it doesn't matter a damn thing for HE, because all you do is take the gun caliber and divide it by 1/6. So in percentage terms, that's 0.1667. And in that case, if you take a look at the Yamato with 460mm guns, you get a penetration value on its HE shells of, I think it's 76.6mm. If you take the British battleship Bellerophon with 305mm guns, you have to calculate it differently because they have a special modifier, like the German battleships, actually. So the Japanese and the American battleships, they have the 0.1667 modifier. Well, with the Germans and the British, it's 0.25. So it's 1/4. And that is a bit different, because that means that the Bellerophon with 305mm guns is able to have 76.2mm of penetration on the HE shells. It's basically a Yamato when it comes to the HE shell penetration. That is extremely important, because the higher the shell pen on HE, the more HE shell pens you get like that. Now, what we know, of course, with AP is that there are three things that'll happen if you're going to cause damage with AP. You're going to get a Citadel, which will do the max damage. You'll get a Shell Pen, which will do 33%, or you'll get an Overpen, which will do 10%. So in the case of the Miyogi, for instance, it has a 10,000 damage maximum AP damage. So that'll do 10,000 damage when you hit the target with AP and Citadel it. If you get a Shell Pen, you do 3,300 damage. If you get an Overpen, you get 1,000 damage. Super straightforward. But when we're looking at the HE, you know, it's still the same thing. You don't get Overpens, but an HE shell penetration is still 33% of the maximum value for that HE shell. And I'm sorry to go through these mechanics like this while gameplay is going on, but this is all crucial. So, by giving the Royal Navy battleships that additional, what is essentially IFHE without any of the drawbacks of that, you're basically saying that these shells are going to penetrate more and thus cause more 33% max damage totals, right? Well, the difference between the Germans and the British is that the Germans are at the low end, actually the lowest end, of the HE shell damage maximum. So say, like, I can't remember something off the top of my head, but they're like 2,800 damage lower than anybody else at like a given tier. And they also have typically the lowest fire chance. The British are on the very top end of that. And that's a really critical point to make, because it means that these shells, these ships too, are just generally focused on HE damage and reliably, consistently providing it. And then you throw on the high fire chance, and that's when things start to unravel a bit. So there's very little thought involved, and this is the weird part, because you go from people complaining about AP on battleships, you know, you don't have to switch ammo type, but now you don't have to do it with HE on the Royal Navy battleships. Chances are you're going to do a given amount of damage in a match, probably mostly by fires, and that's really weird. So the other part of this, the other critical aspect of this, is that like the British cruisers, this whole line has short fuse AP, and that's very interesting because against cruisers and destroyers, these things are fucking gnarly, really powerful. One way or another, either shell type, they're really powerful. And I'm not entirely sure if that's what the game should be dealing with right now. Against other battleships, they're not very good until you get really, really close. And I've brawled quite well, and I've been brawled against very well by other British battleships that have been using AP, because the penetration values just skyrocket. But basically, whereas other nations, the other three nations of battleships, they have a normal AP fuse timer of, say it's like 30 milliseconds. Now, I'm just throwing the number out there. I forget what the actual number is, but the British battleships have half that. So the less, or the thicker the armor, the harder it is for them to do damage, basically, with AP, and that's the point. So these drastically increase in their threat to other battleships the closer you get, and at long range, and at any range otherwise, if you're using HE, they always maintain a threat. That is really a bit too much, and it's too easy to play these and just use HE. And God, that is fantastic dispersion, but I was really trying to test out the Iron Duke here with AP and HE and trying to switch it back and forth. Now, there are situations where, you know, if you are really thinking about what you're doing, no, like having the right ammo selected will make a huge world of difference to you and to the enemy as well. And you know, I highly recommend expert loader on these ships because there will be plenty of situations where AP is the better choice or HE is the better choice. It just depends on a number of factors. And look at this Nuremberg. He's lighting up, and at tier 5, by the way, you get access to the accuracy module. Splat. Like, really solid dispersion. I do think the Iron Duke is a bit overdone in that respect. It's very much like the old Konig, which had incredible accuracy, but it had very small shell caliber, so and very shitty HE. That thing just not very good in some situations. Actually, a lot of situations, but you know, if you had to use HE, you probably wasn't going to be a very good result. I end up aiming a bit low here against this Queen Elizabeth, but you know, when looking at the Orion, I do think that's a ship that's a bit overdone as well. For tier 4, it needs to get scaled back in a few areas, but I do think otherwise, if they just tone down a couple things a bit, it would actually have a really good place and not just be fun, but balanced, and not just to play, but to play against. And I really think that's something that they can very easily achieve with just a couple small tweaks with the tier 3 and 4. With the Iron Duke, I can't win with this ship. I get stuck on maps where it's too large and I'm going one direction and my team on the other side of the map collapses and I can't get back in time to make anything happen, or I get overwhelmed or taken out by, you know, aircraft carriers that are tier 7. I just can't do anything, and I really do like this ship quite a bit. I can't win with it, and no matter what I really tried to do, save for this situation, this ended up being a hell of a lot closer of a match than I think anybody really expected, and so that's always a nice change of pace, you know. But here's another situation that should be a dev strike, but for some reason it's not, and I have that happen a lot since patch 6.10. Don't know why, but anyways, moving on to the Queen Elizabeth, the tech tree Warspite, or so you would think. Let's take a shot here. Look at this beautiful AP. So the Warspite is like the other nations in terms of the HE being 1/6, the AP not being short fuse. So just that alone means that these two ships are going to be pretty different. However, the Queen Elizabeth has 381mm shell caliber. That is really important because this ship also has, on an average, a bit lower of a fire chance. I think it's 35% compared to what, 40+% for the prior ships. And look at this dispersion. Oh my god, if I just knew that the Buddy Oni was actually going backwards, if I just took an extra second, that would have wiped him out. But truly incredible dispersion on the ship. It does straddle a lot. I have some examples of that, but you know, the Queen Elizabeth has some advantages and disadvantages. So again, it has the advantage with the HE being quarter shell pen, and the fact that it's 381mm, so that means that it pens a ton with HE, but it's not an HE ship. It's AP oriented, and even with the short fuse, with the 381mm, you can do a ton of damage by overmatching the bow of any battleship that's under tier 8, because basically, what is it, 381mm is able to frontally penetrate, what is it, 27 or 28mm? I always forget the the frontal armor of battleships, you know, up to tier 7, but that was a shot that I really expected to ended up, you know, getting a Citadel, and that sure as hell didn't happen. It had a decent straddle, and then pretty much the same thing here, so quite a bit of a shame. But the Queen Elizabeth does not get the new buffed turret traverse of the Warspite. These are slow as balls. 72-second default, turret traverse, so 56.3 with expert marksman. I think it's down to like 53.6 or 53.2. I think it's 53.2 with Jack Dunkirk if you're using him with expert marksman. So a little bit of a help, but again, that turret traverse, because it's slow, makes the ship predictable. That's what all of these lower tier and you know, up to the King George, basically they're all pretty predictable because of how slow their turrets are. So the last two things I want to point out with the Queen Elizabeth are the AA mounts, which you could see you got your little dual purpose turrets that are secondaries and AA mounts on the side. They're badass, and it's actually the best AA you can get in the line. And I say that relative to the tier, of course. There's no real increase in dual purpose all the way up through the Conqueror, but the mid-range explodes with DPS. That shit gets crazy, and we'll see that later. But anyways, you can get this out to 7.2 kilometers, if I'm not mistaken, with the AA range module, the AFT, BFT captain skills, and manual AA, since that doubles the DPS of the guns of caliber of that greater than 85. Jeez, that was really hard for me to say, but so when we're talking about that, that's actually really great, because at least it has a different identity to at least some degree from the rest of the ships in the line, because none of them really do that, which is kind of weird. But anyways, the other part is that the Queen Elizabeth takes a shitload of damage from any source very, very easily. It's not a ship that it absorbs shells more so than bouncing, you know, and that's a bit of a problem for me, because the survivability of the Warspite sucks. I hate playing that ship because, you know, get a couple people firing at you, next thing you know, you're at 25% health, like that. And that's the same thing with the Queen Elizabeth. The benefit the Queen Elizabeth has, though, is that the Royal Navy battleship line has an immunity when you hit repair of 15 seconds. The Warspite has 5 seconds. That thing succumbs to focused fire so rapidly, and it's ridiculous. But yeah, generally I think these ships are pretty close to being balanced. I know how that sounds. They need some serious tweaks, I'm not denying that, but reduce the fire chance, maybe reduce I don't know, I would say if you don't reduce fire chance, then you have to reduce the HE shell damage overall, or if you don't reduce that, then you have to reduce the fire chance. It's one or the other, maybe a little bit of both, and I think that would bring them more in line with the rest of the ships in each respective tier. I would say the Queen Elizabeth is where it should be. You know, it's on the lower end at 35%, which sounds ridiculous to say that that's low end for fire chance, but the drawbacks are there, and I mean, it feels good at top tier, but it feels noticeably vulnerable at anything else. So that's, I think the Queen Elizabeth is actually fine, but when we get to the rest of the line, we'll see just how much that changes. So tier 3 to 6, have fun with them, enjoy them, and I think you will. I don't think you necessarily have to feel dirty for playing the ship like the Orion. You probably will, and I know at times I have, so but yeah, it's pretty interesting. And just to point this out, you're going to see a dev strike happen that shouldn't have happened at the very end, and you'll see a dev strike happen that should have happened well, right here, because this is a problem that's been happening a lot in 6.10. Dev strikes that just, like, they're not working properly at all. That should be a dev strike, but we actually, in the previous clip with the G101, the second battleship that I killed with the torps, that also should have been a dev strike, so whatever the hell. But kind of annoying and pretty disappointing being robbed of those. And look at that damage. Watch this. Ow. But anyways, thank you everybody. I look forward to your comments and seeing what you think about this particular group of Royal Navy battleships and what you would do to change them or quote-unquote balance them. Thank you for watching today, guys, and I'll see you back here next time. Take care.